This video is brought to you by NordVPN. As you probably already know by now, Turkey has been stuck in a slow-burning economic crisis for quite some time now. In large part thanks to Erdogan's unorthodox views on monetary policy, the lira has been steadily depreciating, stoking inflation and pushing Turkey into financial autarky. However, after his victory at May's presidential election, it looked like Turkey's economy was back on track. Erdogan appointed a new finance minister and central bank governor, who promptly hiked interest rates. Unfortunately for, well, everyone, this didn't really work. The lira has now fallen to a new low of 27 to the dollar, and inflation actually rose from 38% in June to 48% in July. So in this video, we're going to take a look at what's gone wrong for Turkey's economy, why interest rate rises haven't worked, and how all this affects Erdogan's chances at the upcoming municipal elections. So let's start with a bit of context. The lira has been declining since about 2018, but this slide accelerated rapidly after the pandemic, when inflation ticked up across the world. Usually, central banks hike interest rates to reduce inflation, but Erdogan instead prefers to cut rates. Erdogan claims that this is because higher interest rates are some sort of conspiracy advanced by what he describes as the interest rate lobby. But it's probably more because he knows that, as many Western countries are currently discovering, hiking interest rates can cause real economic pain, even if it does eventually bring down inflation. Anyway, to get his way, Erdogan has fired any central banker who's dared to oppose him, and the central bank has, accordingly, cut rates from 19% in late 2021 to a new low of 8.5% in February of this year. As orthodox economists predicted, these low interest rates only devalued the lira further, which in turn pushed up inflation. For context, the lira fell from 8 lira to the dollar in 2021 to nearly 20 lira to the dollar at the beginning of 2023, and Turkey's official year-on-year inflation rate reached a peak of 85.5% in October of last year, with unofficial estimates putting the true number at about double that. Anyway, in the build-up to May's election, Erdogan realised that he was in a difficult spot. The lira was declining fast, pushing inflation to politically unpalatable heights and crippling ordinary Turks' purchasing power. But Erdogan knew that the orthodox solution to this, raising rates, would be politically embarrassing and risk pushing Turkey into recession. So instead, Erdogan kept rates nice and low at 8.5%, but used Turkey's foreign exchange reserves to keep the lira at about 20 per dollar. Essentially, Erdogan told the Turkish central bank to spend billions of dollars and euros buying up the lira on international markets, which artificially inflated its value. This is a practice known as defending your currency, and while it can work for a short period of time, it's very expensive and fundamentally unsustainable. Turkey's central bank burned through nearly $8 billion worth of reserves in just the weeks leading up to the election, and its net reserves, i.e. its reserves once you minus out all the money it owes to other Turkish banks, actually went negative in the aftermath of the election. Once the election was over, however, Erdogan stopped defending the lira, and it promptly slid to about 23 to the dollar. Finally, Erdogan realised that he was going to have to U-turn on his interest rate policy, which is why, in early June, a few weeks after his election victory, Erdogan appointed Mehmet Şimşek as his finance minister and Hifzi Gaye Erkan as central bank governor. Both Şimşek and Erkan were considered safe hands. They've both made it clear that they disagree with Erdogan's unorthodox monetary policies, and they've both spent a lot of their careers at big Western banks. However, Erdogan immediately made it clear that they wouldn't be given total control over the economy. There were protracted negotiations before either of them were hired, and Middle East Eye later reported that he'd essentially told them that they couldn't raise interest rates too fast or above 30%. Anyway, as expected, they started raising rates soon after being appointed, with a 6.5% hike in late June, which took rates to 15%. This might sound high by Western standards, but remember that Turkey is currently dealing with persistent double-digit inflation and a currency that's lost 80% of its value since the pandemic. Unfortunately for Erdogan, this wasn't enough. The lira continued to slide, hitting 26 to the dollar in July and then 27 in August. And inflation, which had previously been on the way down, actually rose from 38% in June to 48% in July. Turkey also ran a pretty significant trade deficit, i.e. imported more than it exported, which isn't good news for the lira, because usually a trade deficit puts downwards pressure on a currency. Turkey's central bank responded to this disappointing data by hiking rates by 7.5% last week, which was way more than expected and brought Turkey's headline rate to 25%. But the lira barely moved on the news, and things got so bad that the Turkish central bank actually had to restart its defence of the lira, spending something like $5 billion worth of reserves just last week. So you get the idea, interest rates aren't really working, and this seems to be for two reasons. First, they're not going up fast enough. Even though 25% sounds really high, inflation is still running at way higher than that. Which means that Turkey's so-called real interest rate, i.e. the interest rate minus the inflation rate, is still way below zero. This means that Turkish citizens know that, even at 25% interest, their lira won't be kept up with prices, so they're better off just spending it, which fuels inflation. Second, investors don't think that Erdogan has the political stomach to actually raise interest rates as high as they need to go, which is why he's already made it clear to Simsek and Erkan that they won't tolerate steep rate hikes, and we're now only 6 months or so away from next year's municipal elections. Like any politician, Erdogan likes giving out money before elections, which is what he did before the presidential election with his pay rises to minimum wage workers and civil servants, and also what he did before the last municipal elections in 2019 with a massive credit surplus. Ultimately, this inefficiency of these moderate rate hikes leaves Erdogan and his ministers with a difficult dilemma. They can either hike rates fast and hard, which risks a recession and might hurt Erdogan's chances at the 2024 elections, but might finally bring inflation under control, and importantly demonstrate to international investors that they should be investing in Turkey, or they don't hike rates too fast, which would keep the electorate happy before the municipal elections, but risk exacerbating Turkey's inflationary crisis and prove once and for all to the international community that Turkey is an economic basket case that's not going to improve anytime soon. Following stories and doing independent journalism often requires a fair bit of travel, from attending the NATO summit in Lithuania or Munich Security Conference to exploring Aldi across Germany or being forced to hang out with fellow Nebula creators. It's all right for some people. What is consistently annoying, though, is the technology. When you need to work from abroad or even just access the services you're used to, it's often way harder than you'd like, requiring endless verification, validation, and authentications. As I'm sure you already know, that's when NordVPN comes into play, helping you connect to the internet wherever you are. Whether that's connecting back at home so your work account doesn't freak out, or connecting to another country from the comfort of your living room to get discounts on your next trip. That's right, very often other countries get cheaper prices for flights, with research finding US consumers pay up to 3 times more. NordVPN are actually currently running a major back-to-school promotion, which means that when you sign up for a 2-year plan, you not only get a massive discount, but you also get an extra 4 months. That's a huge discount if you click our link. Plus, Nord will keep sponsoring TLDR if people click it. We've been told that sometimes when people hear us talk about NordVPN, they open up a tab, start searching, but they don't click our link. I'm certainly glad that they get the service, but you only get the discount and you only support the channel through that link. So if you're trying to improve our journalism by signing up for Nord, use our link when you do, and you'll get their great service at a discount.